Let me forewarn at the outset, this is not meant to be a full or comprehensive review of Paradise Lost. This is more a gut reaction to rewatching it, and I'll be honest, it only lasted kind of an hour. I did try to listen to a huge portion of the documentary, but after a certain point, it got kind of disgusting and a little bit too deceptive that it was hard to pay attention to. That said, there are snatches in a few of the interviews that make the documentary worthwhile, but for the most part, it does follow a very simple narrative structure. And again, I want to forewarn people in another way. The very beginning is extremely graphic. They show the bodies of the victims. I don't know if that's proper or not, and I thought the use of rock music was not a good idea. So the beginning section is very rough and crude. I had literally forgotten about that part, and I'm like, oh my god. So the early beginning is not promising. That said, I do think they lay out their case of the innocence of Damien and the three teenagers arrested. That is fine. Good or bad, I do think they show that the legal case against them is pretty weak, and it does show the courts and the cops are extremely corrupt. We just had witnesses who knowingly lied, and the defense team for Damien and the other people weren't able to call that out. So it's pretty disturbing how far they went to, quote, break the law, really, to convict these teenagers. However, I think when they try to provide their more positive case, that's where things get very troublesome. With one or two exceptions, the local community is shown to be a bunch of Bible thumping morons and just lunatics. Thankfully, there are a few cases where we do see the humanity of the victims and their parents. But being brutally honest, yeah, the parents of these victims, for the most part, were terrible people. These kids just had the worst luck. They just didn't have good parents. Except for one pair of parents. They were actually very good, and their anger as well as their forgiveness and mercy and their reactions felt very honest and human. But a lot of this is very manufactured to basically show a southern town going crazy with hysteria, and that is correct, as well as fingering possibly innocent people, and I think that is also correct. However, they really omit a huge, and I mean a huge amount with Damien, to make it seem like, oh, he's just a nice young guy. He just got into a Wicca book, read some Crowley, read some Stephen King, listened to heavy metal. No, his ties to the occult are much deeper and darker. And Damien was caught several times lying about it. And he has these insane, again, from his own words, from his own mouth, from his own writings, making these pretensions to be a great, powerful magician, as well as having some pretty awful derogatory language. So if you go more deeply into Damien's background and even Baldwin's background, it's much, much more disturbing. That said, I think when people really simplistically and snidely try to convict Damien and the other two kids, they're not really looking closely. Like the biggest thing I see being brought up is the Miss Kelly confessions, but they really show those confessions are worthless. We just have the worst of both worlds. One, the courts and the cops were really corrupt. Okay, there the documentary is strong. They do show that. But really, the emphasizing of purity of innocence is not correct. Definitely, they were legally innocent. I think that's definitely shown, and they were vindicated there. But really, the framing of Damien as this kind of anti hero who's being victimized, that's not really the whole truth. And that is very disturbing, as well as the exploitation of these three children, because they really just drop out. They become the focal point of all this hysteria, but we barely find anything about them. It's just very vague, very superficial. So I can, in good faith, say, see this documentary as a documentary. It is what it is. It's a very partisan hit piece. However, it does have a few valuable moments, which I will try to review in future videos. That said, I can't say pay for it, so try to look for it in ways against YouTube. I can't say explicitly, but just try to see it. But when you see it, always have a question mark in the back of your mind because so many things, the framing, the music, and just little moments are very deceptive. That said, this is not a tale without heroes. I do think the defense team for Damien, Baldwin, and Miss Kelly, they actually have come out pretty good. Yes, they're using some questionable tactics here and there, but overall, they actually seem to be what they are. They're defending their clients, they're showing holes in the prosecution, and their hands actually seem to be clean. It's unfortunate that there just aren't partisans for those three children because, yes, it's a good piece of justice that the teens were released eventually and that they were cleared. However, we still have a potential killer out there, and essentially those three children have not gotten the justice they deserve. And that's very, very depressing when you think about it.